Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter. We are going to pick up this week from where we left off last week after Jesus's resurrection. And we're going to read today from John chapter 20, verses 19 through 29. So this is a story about an experience the disciples had after Jesus's death. And in this story, the disciples were gathered when Jesus first returned to them. But Thomas was not among them. And then later, when Thomas was among them and Jesus appears again, he's still doubtful about that this is actually Jesus, because how can this be? Now, Thomas saw everything that happened to Jesus with his own eyes. He saw Jesus whipped and beaten, and he knew Jesus was dead because he saw it happen himself. So it's natural that he was feeling a little doubtful that this was actually Jesus alive again. But he didn't ignore the possibility that Jesus was alive either. Thomas admitted that his faith was crushed, and Jesus didn't leave Thomas out because he had doubt. Instead, Jesus met Thomas where he was at, even though he was doubtful. And he let Thomas see the scars on his hands and his feet, say, yeah, I know, but it's really me. Jesus' action breathed life and spirit and breath into Thomas's fragile faith, and replacing Thomas's doubt with a very strong belief. So here is John 20:19 through 29. It was still the first day of the week. That evening, while the disciples were behind closed doors because they were afraid of the Jewish authorities, Jesus came and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. When the disciples saw the Lord, they were filled with joy. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so am I sending you." Then he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they are forgiven. If you don't forgive them, they aren't forgiven." Thomas, one of the 12, wasn't with the disciples when Jesus came. The other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he replied, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, put my fingers in the wounds left by the nails, and put my hand into his side, I won't believe." After 8 days, his disciples were again in a house, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus entered and stood among them. He said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. Look at my hands. Put your hand to my side. No more disbelief. Believe." Thomas responded to Jesus, "My Lord and my God." Jesus replied, "Do you believe because you see me? Happy are those who don't and yet believe." Then Jesus did many other miraculous signs in his disciples' presence, signs that aren't recorded in this scroll. But these things are written so that you will believe that Jesus is the Christ, God's Son, and that, believing, you will have life in his name. So this is John's version of the Pentecost experience. And it's rather different from the story related in Acts. Just as God breathed air into Adam's nostrils in creation, so now the risen Christ breathes the Holy Spirit into the disciples. And it's a gift that he promised them before he died. We read this in John chapters 14. Much has been written on John's understanding of the Holy Spirit because the Greek word that he uses for Holy Spirit or breath, it has no exact English counterpart and no exact way to translate it. So it can be translated in different ways. But the gift of the risen Christ is a spirit with both challenges and comforts us. And it empowers and embraces, and it transforms the disciples from students. So the word disciple means student. But with this breath of Christ, they're transformed to apostles. And the word apostle means those who are sent out. So with this breath that he's giving them, he is transforming them from students to those who can go out and teach others. With this gift comes not only peace, which we see in Jesus's greetings to disciples. He keeps saying, peace be with you, right? But it also comes with it responsibility, because they're challenged to pick up where Jesus had left off in his work and forgiving sin and calling people into a new relationship with God, inspired by the breath of hope. So how do we experience the Spirit challenging and comforting us? So the promise of God is that we are not alone in suffering and in celebration. And just as the earliest church found the Spirit among them and the disciples found the Spirit among them, so can we. So we can look at the Spirit to embrace us and to empower us to carry on. And so I want you to think about, especially you younger folks, I mean, you probably consider yourself more of a student right now than as a teacher, so a disciple. But I think everyone, for all of us, we are all remain students to a certain extent throughout our lives. But the more we learn, the more we have to offer other people. So we are able to transition from being disciples to apostles, those who are sent out to teach. And I think we're always a little bit of this, but as the more we grow and learn, the more we can become apostles to and help other people. So that's all for today. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy this beautiful spring-like and warm weather we've been having before it rains next week, I think. And I will see you next time.